Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America. Today we're talking with dancer, choreographer Jeremy McQueen, the founder and artistic director of the Black Iris Project, meant to tell the stories of African Americans and dance by performers of color. Among his works, Madiba, curated by the spectacular Misty Copeland at the Kennedy Center, and the new dance about a mother's tragic loss, and upcoming dance about Harriet Tubman. Jeremy, thanks so much for being with us. You mean it when you say you're telling our history through dance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
It's great. And Audrey, you have to make sure you get a shot of his dance shoes, even though they may be sneakers, as my kids would call it. But, you know, and we know that we have a dancer in the, in the studio when we've got sparkly shoes. So you started dancing really, really young.
I did.
So tell us about that and going to see Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
I don't remember that much dancing going on in Phantom.
I was 8 years old when my mom took me to see the national tour of the Phantom of the Opera when it came to San Diego, where I was born and raised. We sat all the way in the balcony on the last row, so high up that my mom rented binoculars for me to be able to really enjoy the experience.
Right.
But from the time that the curtain went up, everything had me in a trance, from the costumes, the sets, the lighting, the sound, the music, everything about it just took me by storm. And I looked at my mom after that performance and I said, I want to do this. I want to be a part of this. I didn't know whether it was going to be on stage as a performer or whether it would be in the orchestra pit playing an instrument, but I loved that feeling and I wanted to recreate it.
You knew that that was your life. And your parents, academics, they supported you in this pursuit?
They did. My parents, they grew up in the South. They grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. And
yay, my hometown.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In very large families. They grew up very poor, and they met in college at Alabama State University, and that was when they first kind of had experiences of going to see the arts. I recall my mom telling me dates that my dad and my mom went on where they went to see Dance Theater of Harlem's Firebird. They also saw Stephanie Mills in The Wiz.
Right.
And I remember my mom saying that like she wished that she had been exposed to these things earlier in her life. So my parents made it their mission to offer me opportunities that they didn't get growing up.
So you're an only child, and so they said, Jeremy, you want to dance? We're going to let you dance. So where did you start?
Actually, I started with music. Music was my first thing. Violin, I started at age 5, and it was because of my dad. My dad was like, he needs to learn how to play an instrument. I wish I would have learned, so let's just put him in violin.
So you were one of those kids where the parents said, I didn't get to do this,
yes,
but he
absolutely.
will.
Absolutely.
Right. So you were playing classical violin. You started when you were 5.
I did. I started with the violin first, and then I moved on to the flute and the piano, and I played with the San Diego Youth Symphony when I was in like the 9th grade. So I had a very diverse arts background.
Sure.
My parents kind of put me in everything just to kind of see what would stick and what I would really enjoy and excel in.
When did you get to your first dance class then?
Dance came by way of studying musical theater. So I studied at a conservatory after school called San Diego Junior Theater. And we had to take dance classes as part of like our summer intensive and spring break and things of that nature. And I just really loved being able to express myself through movement more than anything else.
Well, I feel cheated because I have not seen you dance in person, but we have people here at the studio who know your work and are saying he's like this whirlwind of motion and whatever.
Oh, thank you.
So one day I hope to see that. But meanwhile, you have this wonderful project called the Black Iris Project, where you are telling the stories of our lives. And tell us first how you created that. Your mom had something to do with that as well.
She did, yeah. It was back in summer of 2012 when my mom told me that she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had actually been going through chemotherapy treatments 3,000 miles away from where I was and had not told me. So when she finally told me, it kind of turned my world upside down. I didn't know what to do, what to expect, or how to react. And it just so happened the day after she told me, a friend of mine and I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was my first time ever going, and I fell in love with this painting called Black Iris 3 by Georgia O'Keeffe. And something about the painting just really drew me in, similar to that same experience that I had with Phantom of the Opera. I just couldn't stop staring at it. The painting itself kind of looks like a yin-yang in the sense that The bottom is very dark and rooted and grounded, where the top of the flower is very effervescent and floral and light. And looking more at the painting and kind of studying it, I saw almost like a dichotomy of what my mother has been and what other Black women have been to me in my life, being that strong, rooted, grounded figure in my life, but also being the caring, nurturing, comforting person. And so as part of a award that I was applying for with the Joffrey Ballet in Chicago called the Choreographers of Color Award.
Drop the Joffrey name. One of the many companies that you've been associated with. You see how he says that very like, oh yeah, by the way, yeah.
I had to write a proposal of, if I were to receive this award, what type of ballet would I make? And I wanted to combine this energizing feeling of this painting, as well as the things that I was going through watching my mom go through these cancer treatments by herself, into a work of art. And so I created Black Iris, which is a tribute to her and two other women in my life that have been very pivotal in my upbringing.
Well, it's just incredible. You have a good group of dancers who have come from Ailey and other companies who are part of your creations. Tell us a little bit about, we have a clip of A Mother's Right, because this is a mother who has a tragic incident. She loses her son. Not too many dances that are shaped around incidents like that, but tell us how you came to that.
Absolutely. I had gone to the Solange concert in the fall of 2017 with my boyfriend, and I was really taken by storm by Solange's performance on stage. When one particular number started, I think it was called Mad, she started talking about the reasons and the right that she had to be mad, and started to have a nervous breakdown on stage, got very upset, very engulfed. And it was one of those moments where we really got to see the rawness of who she was and what she was going through. It was not filtered or fabricated, it was just her expressing her anger. And I started to think a little bit more about, what do we have to be angry about as people, as human beings, as Black people? And that's where I started to filter through these ideas of what stories I could tell that would be shining light on perhaps a different story that we don't always get to see. And that story that I chose was the mother's experience going through various stages of grief.
Okay, we have a clip. This was shot in the Langston Hughes house here in Harlem. Let's take a quick look at that. Incredible. You start by telling the story of the young college student who was murdered, and this is his mother dealing with that grief.
Absolutely. I worked with an incredibly talented playwright named Angelica Shetty, and we created a fictional character that's inspired by so many real mothers around the country throughout history. Mamie Till was one of our huge inspirations as well, because Mamie Till was one of the first women to kind of be on a national platform.
This is Emmett Till's mother.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
Right.
Exposing her grief,
sure.
Having Emmett Till's casket open for the entire world to view.
Making sure that people looked at what had been done to him.
Absolutely.
His murder.
But we also got to see her grief exposed for the first time on such a national level, that I was really inspired by those experiences, as well as other experiences that I had read about.
Talk to us about Madiba, which is another dance of yours that was curated by Misty Copeland at the Kennedy Center.
Yes.
How did that relationship start? That's a pretty good relationship.
Thank you. I started working on Madiba in 2015. And Misty just so happened to find out about the ballet that I was working on. This was before the Black Iris project even had a name. It was just an idea. Right. I knew that I had created Black Iris, the ballet at Joffrey, and I really wanted to continue exploring African American stories. And so we started working on this ballet, and Misty and her team found out about it. And before I knew it, I got this seemingly random email from the Kennedy Center that was expressing interest in my work, and I thought it was junk. I thought it was junk mail. I almost threw it away because I was like, why is the Kennedy Center emailing me?
Yeah, it's one of those classic stories. Of the president couldn't be
Absolutely.
Misty, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but I was just so thrilled. She's been so supportive of our collaborative and the mission that we've been taking to diversify ballet. So often what we know of classical ballet are stories that are rooted in European tradition and history and fables. But what we're doing is we're really trying to shake up the ballet world to be able to bring stories to life that reflect multiples of people's backgrounds and histories.
Yes, and this is telling the story of Nelson Mandela,
Absolutely.
27 years in prison. Here's Misty Copeland talking about Jeremy's work.
Jeremy McQueen telling this story of Nelson Mandela and using dance and the Kennedy Center stage is a great example of sharing a story of justice. It really relates to what African Americans have experienced in America as well with racism. Using art to share these stories is so incredible. It's something that so many people from different levels of society and different backgrounds can come together and experience in a beautiful way.
Now that's a nice thing to add to your resume, so that it was there on your resume, but tremendous. But you've worked with so many famous dancers, and on shows. You travel with Wicked.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about your Broadway career and how that feeds into this I don't want to say more serious work, but work that has to do with historical figures.
Absolutely. Phantom of the Opera was my base, and as I was studying dance growing up, I studied in various ballet schools like ABT, and I also studied Ailey, but I always knew that I wanted to do musical theater as well. Concert dance is my love in terms of being able to express myself through choreography, but being able to be on stage and tell stories, fictional stories, has always been a huge passion of mine. So touring the country with Wicked and The Color Purple has just been a thrill, but I feel like it gave me a foundation to be able to kind of create my own organization. All of our works are narratives that we tell, whether they're fictional or they're true stories. They're all narrative, story-driven works, and I think that my experience in musical theater has just enhanced my being able to tell stories through movement.
The only way you can do this is by having funds to do it, and you've been very fortunate or gifted in that regard as well. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Cuny Dance. Talk to us about Cuny. Here we are at Cuny TV. Yeah. Talk to us about the Cuny Dance Initiative.
Yes, the Cuny Dance Initiative was a grant that we received that was a developmental grant to be able to come into a Cuny school and have studio space to explore and create. And that's actually kind of where A Mother's Right first started brewing, was through this residency that I had a couple years ago.
And so now you're teaching all over the country at various dance schools and with companies. And talk to us about what that's like. You were saying that at Kentucky was when this kernel of being an educator grew?
So when I was on tour with Wicked, one of the stops that we had, we were in a city for usually 3 weeks at a time. So I got a really good time to get to know the city and the people and be able to go out into the community and do some teaching. And I reached out to a number of organizations about coming in and talking about my life and my experience. For me, one of the biggest inspirational or motivational tools for me has been being able to see other people and be exposed to them and hear their stories, and to allow that to motivate me to keep pushing forward. And it was in Kentucky where I had connected with a number of students of color that really shaped the way I looked at my career and my mission in life. I really wanted to give back and find ways to inspire and encourage others.
Yes, the dance life is a tough life for a person of color.
It is.
You know, I mean, even Misty talks about being the wrong shape, being the wrong, everything. So, I mean, you're having this wonderful extended career, I mean, by creating your own company as well as going around and teaching. But talk to me a little bit about, are your fellow dancers of color up against a solid wall when it comes to classical ballet, for instance? I don't see too many, at those top levels.
I think that wall is being chiseled at bit by bit. Misty Copeland has been such a champion in helping to reshape and reform the way we look at ballet in a contemporary society. There have been so many dancers that have come before her that have been champions for her to be able to stand on where she stands, and we proudly stand on all of their shoulders as well. But the great thing about our collaborative is that we allow dancers of all different companies and backgrounds to be able to come together and have a space to just connect and to talk to one another about each other's experiences without cameras, without anything. It's just us in the studio producing work inspired by Black lives and also re-energizing our own lives by hearing of other people's challenges and how they work through them.
And Missy has talked about her body image issues and all. For a male dancer, a male Black dancer, is that also an issue or less so?
Absolutely. My own experience, I guess I would say, is perhaps less than some of the pressures that women go through. But for myself, I'm 5'7". I've always been that short, stocky kid. And even when I was studying in top schools around the country, I was often told I needed to lose more weight. So the pressure is always there, especially as a person of color. I feel like the expectation is even greater because you're that token or the one of very few that reign in that company. So we have to present ourselves with perfection almost, which is practically unattainable, but it can cause a lot of mental challenges for sure.
Right. Were you ever injured? I know Misty dealt with and wrote brilliantly about the injuries that she suffered in her career when the only thing she wanted to do was dance.
Right.
Have you encountered anything like that where you just physically were not able to go on?
Absolutely. I was on tour with the Radio City Christmas Spectacular shortly after I had graduated from college, and it was the night before we opened that I sprained my ankle. I had a really, really bad ankle sprain. I never had an injury like that before. We had athletic trainers that were able to kind of give me meds and tape me up, and I did, I think it was like 80 shows on a sprained ankle or something like that in the span of 2 months.
And she danced on a broken leg, right? You know, I
did.
mean, it's a wild, wild life. But you managed to go?
I did. I managed to push through it during that time period, but when I came back, my doctors looked at me like, what are you doing? You have to sit down. And that was so hard for me to be able to have to sit in a chair and do nothing. You know, I couldn't express myself the way I wanted to. And so that's when I actually started diving a little bit more into choreography because depression really sunk in. And I said, like, I've got to find a way to stay active in my art. So a friend of mine, we rented some studio space and I sat there in the chair and I tried to describe exactly what I wanted her to do with just my arms or just, by communicating through words.
Well, you were brilliant enough to find a pathway through, but we have dancers in our family, as I was telling you, and watching the watching the kids. One day I was at the ice machine and there was a dancer and she was loading up a bag full of ice and she said, "Oh no, not for a drink. It's for my feet," and I looked down and they were bloody. It was just hard work.
It is, but it's so rewarding. It's so fulfilling. Being able to express yourself through movement. It's unlike any other thing I've ever experienced in my life. Yeah,
talk to us about people like Ailey. And I know Bill T. Jones, you did some work at Live Arts, so examples of Black men who, have done extraordinary things.
Yeah, Alvin Ailey has always been a huge inspiration for myself. Growing up in San Diego, it's 3,000 miles away from New York. I knew nothing of what life would be like in New York, but hearing the stories of Alvin Ailey and Arthur Mitchell and Bill T. Jones really inspired me to want to take that leap of faith and move to New York. I was so honored to have been accepted to the Ailey Fordham BFA program where I received my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Dance degree, and my project is fiscally sponsored through Bill T. Jones's company, New York Live Arts.
Right.
Which has
He
been
is
a huge blessing.
So phenomenal, the work that he does, very avant-garde.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself avant-garde or more in the classical?
My work is definitely more classical and more contemporary. I think the things that I see in terms of similarities between myself and Bill T are pushing boundaries. I see art as being an opportunity to engage in conversation and to push the envelope about hot topics that are going on in our society, especially, prison reform. There's so many things that need immediate change, and as artists, we have an ability and a duty to be able to express the change that we wish to see in the world through our mediums.
Yeah, so you had a big summer program at Summer Stage.
We did.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. Because will you do that again next year?
It was just for this summer. I'm not sure if we'll be back next year. But we did an amazing program at Marcus Garvey Park. Marcus Garvey Park's Richard Rogers Amphitheater has a 1,600-seat theater where were able to make our performances free and accessible to the community of Harlem and the community of New York City at large.
Now, I understand that you are working on Harriet Tubman's life next.
Yeah.
You know, you're taking on the big ones. Nelson Mandela, Harriet Tubman. What will that be like?
So, as I mentioned before, my parents grew up in Alabama. My dad grew up in the country. And my dad, who passed away 2 years ago, left my mother and I land that he owned in Alabama, a lot of land in the woods. And so as I was thinking...
Where?
Just outside of Castleberry, Alabama.
Ah, right.
So my mother and I were talking about ways that we could essentially pay tribute or honor my father on the land. My father was always so supportive of my artistic endeavors, and I know he would want me to do something there. So I thought, why not shoot a dance film on the land? And one of the stories that I thought of the most was Harriet Tubman, because I'm sure that there were slaves at one point throughout that area, in that neighborhood. So as part of my research moving forward, now that our summer program with Mother's Right is over, I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into the history of what that land is and its surrounding areas, and how we can bring this interesting and creative ballet narrative together through movement.
Well, and it's not far from Montgomery, where Brian Stevenson has his lynching museum.
Yes.
You know, I was just there.
I'm really hoping we might be able to work with them as well.
Right, I think it would be a wonderful, wonderful collaboration. Yeah.
Alabama State University, where my parents went to school, we're also looking to work with their students. They have a new dance department, and so this new ballet, we're planning on bridging the gap between professionals and pre-professionals by being able to put them in a room together. So some of the dancers will be students from Alabama State, and some of them will be professionals from our collaborative.
Well, I mean, since that's my home territory, you know, I'm just thrilled about all of that.
Thank you.
Do you think you'll go back to Broadway, get on the road again? Is that something that you might want to do with your life?
You know, I have really enjoyed my experiences in musical theater, but right now, at this point in my career, I love being able to create the stories a little bit more. I do want to choreograph for musical theater and eventually direct. As well as do operas as well. I'd love to do that. But I really love being on the artistic side of everything.
Right. So, you know, we always ask our guest on Black America to finish the statement, the power, the strength of Black America lies in. What do you, if I can say at 32, believe that is?
I believe it's in our creativity. I believe we as people are so creative to be able to maneuver through so many different challenges, and I think that it's just really beautiful how we are able to continually reinvent ourselves, to collectively organize, and to continue pushing forward by use of our creativity.
You mentioned that you might want to do an opera. I just saw Aniganani Rose.
Oh my gosh.
And did you get to see it in
didn't.
Carmen Jones?
I heard it was incredible. I hope it's coming to Broadway.
I hope so too. It was truly, truly, truly incredible.
Wow.
When I once bought a ticket to the Metropolitan Opera for Carmen, you know, as a treat to myself, like a very expensive ticket. I swear that those 10 Black people on the stage did a better job than the entire, don't tell the Metropolitan Opera that I'm saying this now, you know, but I always think about that, the enormous talent that we have that goes unrecognized. Is that a frustration for you that you are having to fight, and you will have to fight?
Absolutely.
You know, continuously to get the same credit that others get.
Absolutely. I was actually a dancer at the Metropolitan Opera for 2 seasons.
You were?
And I danced in Aida, my last season that I worked there. And one of the things that made me so outraged was the fact that of all of the dancers in Aida, only 2 were of color, or 2 were African American.
And the whole thing is
It's set in Egypt. You know what I mean? It just blew
Right.
my mind. So
Right.
that's why I feel like being on the creative side or the artistic side is so much more of a passion project for myself in terms of where I see my career, because I want to be the one to help be the change and to help break those boundaries and to help increase that visibility and representation of dancers and actors of color.
Right, right. And what is your mom having to say about all of this now? Having watched you be, well, she was the inspiration in many ways
She was.
for this creation of the Black Iris Project. You know, what does she say about this life you've created in this profession?
She
Here
loves
I am, a grandmother and mother talking to you about. Forget that.
You already know the answer.
Right.
She wishes she could be with me every step of the way, every day. She's still in California. She loves it out there with the sunshine and the beaches, but I send her everything, and she comes to our performances and gets dressed up. She loves every bit of it.
Well,
so.
that's great. Well, Jeremy McQueen, thank you so much. Congratulations. We look forward
you.
to Harriet Tubman.
Thank you.
And seeing everything else. And I want to see you dance. Okay.
Hopefully soon.
All right, terrific. And thanks to you out there, too, for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we'll see you the next time.